What is up, and welcome to an episode of the True Fitness Podcast. I'm Adrian Conway, and man, that almost sounds a little strange and it feels a little weird to say. This is a new version of the podcast. Many changes and many renditions later. We've changed from Rise and Pod with Adrian Conway to the True Fitness Podcast with Adrian Conway. And it would do no justice for me if I didn't begin this by essentially reintroducing myself to anybody who might be tuning in new, who might be following our podcast for the very first time or tuning in on YouTube for the very first time. But I am Coach Conway to many, previously a Division I college football player at Weber State University, studied human performance, grew up very obsessed with sports, sport development, and training to improve my own performance as an athlete. And of course, that bled into my passion and ability to do that for other people. After my playing years were done of American football, I was still clearly in the field of human performance. I was training, doing traditional strength conditioning work at Weber State University, and for many different clubs local here to Utah for a very diverse background of sports. So I worked with soccer players, tennis players, basketball players, football players. Lacrosse was still growing at the time, but I had some lacrosse athletes, and all the while, my primary focus and passion was to enhance speed, increase agility, and minimize injuries suffered by these youth athletes as they performed on the field or on the court. Long story short, I stumbled across CrossFit on accident. I, in fact, found it by browsing Jim Jones literature on the internet because I was curious about how he was training all these people for all these movie roles that he would actually have them in. He trained Henry Cavill for Superman. He trained the entire cast of the movie 300. That dates me a little bit. When I was in high school, the movie 300 came out. It was very popular. They had these unique physiques that actually looked like they did some things with them and not were just ready to get on stage and pose with them. So I was very curious about this. I then found CrossFit through Mark Twight and Jim Jones, and I recognized that there was a CrossFit Games. Of course, coming off the heels of my football career, I was very interested in continuing my passion that I had and the ability to express my physicality, and CrossFit nailed that for me. So I saw Graham Holmberg won the CrossFit Games in 2010. I was like, oh, he's a former football player. I could probably do that thing. And I signed up for my level one. I took my level one at the end of 2010 in November in Park City. Chris Spieler, Miranda Alcaraz, Eric O'Connor. That's just to name a few people who were a part of my level one experience and who taught my foundational exposure to what CrossFit is. Now, when I saw CrossFit, I had many reservations toward it. I actually assumed that it was bodyweight biased, that it was gymnastics biased, and that it was monostructural biased, only because the people who had exposed me to CrossFit through their practices had a bias themselves in the way they designed workouts and the way that they taught it and the way that they talked about it. Sitting there in my level one with my butt in that seat, it gave me a very thorough understanding that it was very adjacent and even parallel to the things that I learned in the field of strength and conditioning. It was important to prioritize intensity, whether it was strength training or metabolic conditioning. And of course, that needed to suit the desired outcome for the athlete. But from a GPP perspective, that was synonymous with what I learned in the field of human performance. It was the same with movement quality. CrossFit's primary driving tenet, mechanics, consistency, then and only then intensity, were already held by the best strength conditioning coaches that I saw in their field. And that was me just having the experience to intern under some, and then of course have even a part-time role in developing some of the teams that I worked with. And then of course this element of variance and variation within the modalities that you express an athlete to. It was very understood and still understood that in the strength conditioning field, when coaches are good at their craft, they don't get athletes into the weight room and do exactly what there's demanded of them on the field or on the court, because they already specialize in those things. In order to protect an athlete best, in order to develop an athlete best, you want to make them a more well-rounded athlete and allow their specialty coaches and their specialty position coaches, and through the hours of practice that they're allowed, to be what refines and takes them to better specified performers. But if I can make anyone a better athlete, they're going to perform at their specialty better. Now, what I knew, the divergent piece of the road, was that CrossFit was training everyday athletes to be more equipped and more prepared for life. I've already used this term GPP, that stands for general physical preparedness. For me, I loved this idea because I was transitioning again from a specialty sport of football my entire life to wanting to compete at the CrossFit Games. The reason I think a lot of traditional strength conditioning coaches have a problem with CrossFit is simply because they are in the field of training athletes for specialty things. There's a work to rest ratios that should be considered. There are movement redundancy issues that they've got to fight over and battle with. There are time restrictions with the athletes that they face. So will they have the ability to teach a really proper full squat snatch to a group of 60 men who are going to be playing Division I football? Maybe not. Will they have the opportunity to refine their mechanics at a high enough level to protect them from error that sometimes is considered when you're working with high level achievers in the form of Division I, Division II, Division III athletes? Maybe not. So there are certain considerations that, of course, traditional strength conditioning coaches need to make on a regular basis that won't directly apply and run parallel to what we practice in the four walls of a CrossFit affiliate, because the environments are completely different. The intended outcomes are completely different. So the way that you go about those things should be, in a way, completely different. But there are many things that go hand in hand. All of this was really important for me to share with you on this initial relaunch of our podcast, I guess the official launch of the True Fitness podcast, because these are all things that I consider in my day in and day out career. I design programs at ttrufitness.com, where I have a team of coaches that I work with. We work specifically with CrossFit athletes that look to level up their game, going from intermediate athletes to RX athletes looking to become more elite-based athletes, and elite athletes looking to become staples in this sport, making it to the CrossFit Games, to the Rogue Invitational, qualifying for the elite division in something like Wadapalooza. The list goes on and on and on. But on the other hand, we still have this vision for traditional strength conditioning. We're in the process of developing programs for youth sports. I work and live here in Salt Lake City. I'm reached out to through many different outlets, from club sports to high school sports, that need assistance or need program design or need in-person coaching that develop athletes even for the specialty sports. So when you think about True, I want you to really think about True Fitness. Our True stands for train to rise up. When I say True Fitness, I mean the aspect of a very well-rounded athlete that is being developed, not just to perform at a high level, but also protect against movement redundancy and be able to train and play at a high level without the risk of inherent injury or lowering the risk of inherent injury. So those are all the things that we consider when we consider the value of this podcast. These are also things that I want to discuss. I want to be able to sit down with coaches. I want to be able to sit down with athletes and have discussions about topics that are often hardly expressed or even talked about in an intelligent way and an open way, because so many become very passionate about their opinions. There are people out in the world that hate and vilify CrossFit. There are equally CrossFitters who hate and vilify other practices. And what I'm the type of coach to recognize is that I love CrossFit and I believe in its methodology. And I also love and believe that there's a specific time and place for linear periodization, specific movement focus, training weakness headlong, and being willing to compromise and sacrifice GPP for a high level achiever that has a very intended outcome. So there's a balance here at True Fitness, and I hope to bring that through this podcast. Some things that you can expect, of course, are that we will discuss topics that are brought up on social media. And I don't mean just like anywhere on social media, because of course that would leave us chasing our tail all the time. And I have programs to design and athletes to check in with on a regular basis, as that is my full-time role. But I wanted to utilize this podcast to kind of spread the message. And so we'll use our clients as examples. We will use common coaching pitfalls as episode topics. We will use mindset and how to compete, how to be a competitor, how to do this on a daily basis, and also how to do it prime time when the lights are bright, and how athletes throughout their careers tend to set themselves apart from their peers in very unique ways, whether it's being very habitual, whether it's being very free in their expectations, how to set goals, performance goals, and even for you CrossFitters out there that are listening to this, how to balance between internal goals and external goals and expectations. Because in our space in sport, this is a very dangerous line to toe, and it's very hard to toe that line. I specifically say that because we play a sport that is ever evolving and ever changing, from the way that you qualify to the workouts that are programmed to how much information you know before you show up and how long that information is shared with you. All of these things make it a very slippery slope for you to set the expectation of, hey, I want to be top 10 in this competition. Hey, I want to be top 5 in this competition. Hey, my goal is to win this competition because of several factors. One, the one that I just mentioned, being the lack of understanding of the test and what it will actually include. 2, who's going to show up to compete against you? 3, how are they preparing? And what is their athletic history and where do they really shine? We come to know that about a lot of the elite athletes in our sport is we do see some change year in, year out. It seems as though the top 10 are very consistent, at least right now. And so we're able to frame some of those expectations around some of those predictable things. But again, it's about having these conversations and bringing you value. I used to do short snippet podcasts called The Daily Rise. And there will be elements of this mindset and charge that will take place on these episodes. At least I hope so. But the overarching theme is that this is going to be the True Fitness Podcast. We're going to go forward. We're going to dive headlong into topics that are going to bring you value in your day-to-day life, whether you're an everyday athlete considering the best way to train. Is it with tempos? Is it with high intensity? Is it with active rest? Is it with who knows? But we're going to create context around your situation, everyone that's listening situation, so that we can actually have an educated discussion and not just be polarizing in our point of view on vilifying any type of training, because it's so easy to do. And that seems to be what everyone's doing today. Anyone that wants to sell you something essentially wants to make you hate one thing and blindly accept the other. We're not going to be the ones on this podcast discussing and vilifying eating vegetables. We're not going to be vilifying fruit. We're not going to be vilifying processed carbohydrates in moderate and wise amounts. I say moderate and wise amounts because, of course, we can vilify carbohydrates if they're processed all the time. Now, you're taking them in amounts that are potentially going to negatively set back your health. So we will have discussions on the way that you fuel your body and the way that you go about everything that can influence your health and your performance, your mindset, and your day-to-day life. And yes, this podcast isn't just for high-level achievers. It will be for the everyday athlete as well. So enough about me, enough about this podcast. One of the things that I wanted to discuss today, and it's going to be a short cover, but a lot of the things that continued to pop up. I posted to my story. If you guys don't follow me now, you can follow me at Adrian Conway _ on Instagram. It is where I am most active and the best place to follow me. From a True Fitness Podcast perspective, or if you're interested in our training, our methodologies, the programs that we offer, what we sell, follow at TTRU Fitness on Instagram, at TTRU Fitness. Again, that's at True Fitness. And our website is truefitness.com, TTRUfitness.com. But when I posted to social media about what I should have episodes about, what do you want to hear about? I mean, there were several people who echoed, I want to hear about mindset, coach. I want to hear about training. I want to hear about the smartest way to train. I want to hear about nutrition. But nutrition was the one. Nutrition was the one that continued to be echoed. I would say I probably got a total of almost 30 responses. About a third were about training and styles of training. Maybe a fourth was about mindset and attitude. And that includes, I put in this bucket also burnout with training or competing. But then by and large, 50% were about some form of nutrition, and some were specific. So I'll save the specifics for another episode. But to just finish this episode particularly, as I'm going to try to keep a lot of these in that 20 to 30 minute range to keep you interested. And of course, hopefully keep you eager to come back and understand that we're not just going long format for the sake of you listening to me talk. But nutrition is everything. I'm not going to hide from the fact that if you want to get the most out of yourself, if you're here looking for an answer to a question about losing weight, an answer to a question about gaining muscle, an answer to a question about performing at the highest level, nutrition is everything. And I won't shy away from saying that. The way that you fuel your body directly affects everything that you do and everything that you feel, from how sleepy you are to how much energy you do have, to the way that your body recovers, to the aches and pains that you feel in your knees and your shoulders and your wrists when you're training at high volume or low volume, to the way that you sleep. to the way that you treat people and the patience that you have because of how much margin you have to the sense of discontentment, meaning that if you're completely fueled on processed sugar and carbohydrates and it's been 2.5 hours since you've eaten, you might already be experiencing a blood sugar drop. So you're a little moody for no reason at all. At least you don't think it's a reason at all, but in fact, it's the way that you feel your body that directly dictates this. It's also going to be the question or the answer to the question about caffeine and caffeine addiction and why it's running rampant in our society now. I enjoy coffee. I love a good cup of coffee. I love a good cold brew coffee. I like 2 shots of espresso. I like a doppio espresso over ice. I like it all. I like my coffee black and I like it simple and I like it tasty. So, in case you don't know, I like coffee. So, I endorse the use of caffeine. But it's important to understand that you've got to be able to weaponize it. And a lot of people are falling victim now to the addictive properties of caffeine and the fact that they feel like they need it and need to use it in order not just to perform at a high level, but actually to get by in their day to day. And that's not a good thing. And it can be corrected with proper hydration and nutrition. We'll get into the details about that in a future episode. But the way I wanted to start this one about nutrition is to lean in with how important it is, which we already covered. It's everything. And I don't say that lightly. But also, what does it mean to create the frameworks for a healthy nutrition application for you, your family? And this goes for the highest level of achiever and for the person who's just literally getting started with having the curiosity about the quality of food that they eat and how they should eat it. I'm going to share this. It's the same thing that I share at the CrossFit Level 1 seminars as the beginning pieces to the solution of the problem that we see with chronic disease. And it's your go-to needs to be eat meats and vegetables, nuts and seeds, some fruit, little starch, and no sugar. Again, I'll repeat, eat meats and vegetables, nuts and seeds, some fruit, little starch, and no sugar. And when I say no sugar, I mean no added sugar. I do not mean the sugar content that you are going to get in the form of fructose from fruit and the other carbohydrates that you might take into your body from the starches that you do eat. Now, understand that we want to minimize processed carbohydrates, right? So when you think about bread, when you think about crackers, when you think about potato chips, we want to minimize those things, little starch. When we think about the starch that we do consume, we want to think about white potatoes, sweet potatoes, rice. Simple. Nature provides them, and they are going to have less addictive properties than you will find in the refined and processed high-level carbohydrates that are often pursued in the things that I already listed, and pastas included. So you need to make sure that you're fueling it properly with the clean food that you can find around you. When I list this, eat meats and veggies, nuts and seeds, some fruit, little starch, and no sugar, you should start to have the realizations that this food is found on the perimeter of the grocery store for the most part, which means you can go get your fresh produce, you can get your veggies, you can get your fruits, you can go to the butcher, you can get your meats. Also, you should think about this food being real food that the earth provides for us. Folks, I'm going to tell you right now that if you eat this way, and of course, this has nothing to do with your very specific individual needs in regards to maybe you have allergies to some of these foods. Maybe you have a dairy intolerance. Maybe you have whatever. And I didn't even specifically talk about dairy, but dairy can be included. You can have dairy within this scope of frameworks, and it can be there in the form of cheese. It can be there in the form of milk, cottage cheese, yogurt, Greek yogurt, right? Again, what we're looking for are some key things. No added sugar, and you want it to be as little processed as you're comfortable with. Does that mean raw milk for you? It could. I don't drink raw milk all the time, but I've had it in the past. What kind of yogurt does that look like for you? Well, one, something that's pretty cost effective for your family, but also has no added sugar. I would encourage you to go with the flavorless Greek yogurt. And if you don't like it, then you have to consider ways to learn how to enjoy it. And I'm gonna also lean in and give you a bit of a lecture about nutrition evolution. When I first got exposed to CrossFit, I heard this and I was like, what? No one had ever really leaned in on making it this simple for me to follow and apply eating real food, eating for wellness. And so I did it. I dove in head first, and I essentially was in the practice of the Paleolithic style diet, which means I didn't have any gluten, I didn't have any legumes, and I also didn't have any dairy at all. And as I eliminated these things from my diet, gosh, my body felt amazing. And as long as I was still doing it in volumes of food that were adequately supporting my training, I got leaner, I felt more alert. I needed less sleep. I felt better on my feet all day coaching my athletes. I felt more patient. I felt less dependent upon food and food cycles, meaning like I didn't feel like I got to 10 o'clock in the morning after eating breakfast at 6:30 and feeling like I was starving. I was more satiated for longer periods of time, and I was also less caffeine dependent. So all these things, I know this might be too much information for some of you. This might be just enough information for others. And you're like, Adrian, you're telling me nothing new. Well, I'm not going to tell you anything new on any of these podcasts. I'm not going to ever pretend that I reinvent the wheel or that I invent the wheel, I should say, or that I'm going to tell you something that I've completely made up on my own, because nothing that I use in coaching I've made up on my own. I haven't designed any studies and gotten any clear data and just created these new protocols. Like I've experimented with many protocols, but all of them, including hints or strategies that I use, whether it's banded style training from the conjugate method, whether it's German volume training for some of the athletes that I work with that need raw strength, whether it is learning how to apply neuromuscular efficiency tests and then apply that and adapt that to everybody individual's own training. All of these things are things that I've learned from people that I've looked up to that I would categorize as mentors, or people that I've read about, and some of my favorite books that you can see back there on my shelf behind me if you're watching this on YouTube. Um, and in all kinds of other ways. I beg, borrow, and I steal every ounce of information that I can share with myself, my family, and then, of course, my clients, and now to all of you, the best that I can. So I'm not going to be over here faking it till I make it, trying to pretend that I am evolved enough to have created anything that I share with you, but I will use it to the best of my ability in order to create a stepping stone or a bridge to a better version of you. So I'll share it here. I will do my best to reference where I get it from here, and the whole goal is to make it in a form that you feel like adds quality to your life. And that's the whole reason that I want to have this show. It's the whole reason that I want to have this opportunity to talk about simple things like nutrition and the application of sort. Um, and then, of course, having other coaches and athletes on the podcast as well. As we venture through this balance of eat meats and veggies, nuts and seeds, some fruit, little starch, and no sugar, do this for a few weeks the best that you can. That means get rid of the junk in your house, get rid of the junk in your pantry. Now, my wife and I have a 7-year-old and a 5-year-old child and children, sorry. And what that means is that, our kids love treats. They like sweets. They like um, rewards, and they enjoy popcorn. They enjoy candy. They enjoy everything that a normal child would enjoy. We've raised them with such a conversation about food that we need to be nourished with good, healthy food most of the time. And periodically, we can have treats. And they start to understand the frequency at which we can eat pizza and eat it out, or eat out in general, or the frequency at which we will allow treats on a movie night when we're sitting down as a family to have candy and popcorn. And maybe even the volumes at which we do. We don't ever want to vilify food in such a way to make our children feel as though something is off limits, because nothing's off limits, but there should be limits set on everything. So to create that understanding, of course, my wife and I have had to create a bit of, not necessarily strategy, but intention with everything that we do, from the food that we have available and keep available in our pantry to how we navigate conversations about those things. And we want to set our children up for success, not just while they're under our roof, but when they leave here one day, to have a pretty thorough understanding of why they need to shop on the perimeter of the grocery store and why they should eat meats and veggies, nuts, seeds, some fruit, little starch, and no sugar 90 to 95% of their time. And then, of course, enjoy the birthday cake at a birthday party, enjoy a beer and some chicken wings with their friends at a Super Bowl party or a football game, and be able to do things that don't necessarily create or separate them from society. One of the last things I want to cover is just a real basic compliance consideration. I mentioned 90 to 95%. For you, when you're first getting started, you might be able to adhere to these principles 80% of the time. Now, it might be more meals within a week than you think it is. So if you eat 4 meals a day, 7 days a week, that's 28 meals. Gosh, you could have 21 meals that are really great and 7 meals that aren't so great, and still adhere to the percentage that will give you success long term. Here's a couple things that you can't do. You can't go off the rails on those 7 meals. You can allow yourself to have a little treat, or maybe some French fries with a favorite burger as one of those meals. Don't have 2 servings of everything, right? Because you want to be consistently building this habit to improve the quality of food that you're eating. After we make the consideration for how you can balance it in your life, it's the simple understanding that as you go and as you build confidence in yourself, you can change and tweak this. This is why you can also follow us at TTRU Nutrition. Yeah, we have an Instagram page specifically for nutrition. We understand that we could talk till our faces are blue about the quality of food that you eat, about how to weigh and measure your food. We could talk about every diet under the sun that is popular or talked about. That doesn't help you achieve anything. If you have a life that is completely foreign to understanding food quality, grocery shopping, food preparation, because we're at a point in our society where a lot of young men and women grow up and they don't have any idea how to cook. They don't even know how to go find something as simple as a red onion at the grocery store, or what asparagus looks like, or what cilantro is, or what it should smell like, or how to identify if food is good or if it's bad without the dates. And so coaching nutrition is something that we take great pride in and we believe is very essential for most humans. And it's because we live in a society and in a world that doesn't allow you to just human off of your natural instincts anymore. Natural instincts, all things considered, you would eat as much nutrient dense and calorically dense food that is around you as possible. And when it has sugar laden or processed food qualities like salt and sugar and other added ingredients that become very addictive over time, your brain will tell you that that's what you should consume as much as possible until essentially your stomach hurts. That's simply a survival mechanism. And without coaching, without guidance, without tutelage, without mentorship about food prep, about food selection, about how you're going to refine this routine for yourself and how you're going to make this work with your family of 4 or 5, or what do you do when your spouse doesn't want to eat healthy, but you do, and your kids fight against these healthy foods. And there are so many complex things that people face on a regular basis. And we're here to help combat that. And that's why we have at True Nutrition, which you can find on Instagram. And it's a part of something that you'll be able to find when you browse and find truefitness.com. So we do coach nutrition. And the reason I went down this rabbit hole is because we have athletes who have different levels and clients. I use the term athlete because, just so you know, and I'll do this a lot on the show, everyone's an athlete to me. You're training for the sport of life, and it's very much a sport. I want you to be able to run. I want you to be able to jump. I want you to be able to throw. I want you to be able to go long. I want you to be able to go short. I want you to do it all. You need to train for the sport of life, and that makes you an athlete. But we have people, clients, athletes, who come to us at a baseline level, and they're like, hey, I want to get healthy. And well, one of the steps in getting healthier is for them to just eat more veggies, and that's where they start. We build in some accountability with that, and then it's like, hey, drink more water. Awesome. And then eventually they are living this lifestyle, eat meats and veggies, nuts and seeds, some fruit, little starch, and no sugar, and they're making progress. As they're making progress, then what we do, we add more steps or more details to the plan. And so eventually what we get to is that they eat meats and veggies, nuts and seeds, some fruit, little starch, and no sugar in amounts that support exercise and not body fat. And now we ask them to actually quantify and weigh and measure. We might have them eating specific amounts of protein, specific amounts of carbohydrates, specific amounts of fats. But navigating throughout this conversation, throughout saying, how are you doing with this? How does your body feel? How stressful is this for you to continue to adhere to? And how have you done over the last 5 to 7 days with weekly check-ins? And then we even take further steps than that. As athletes start to lose weight, maybe they do a great job for 6 to 8 weeks straight. And we're like, well, you know what? You've done a great job in that phase where you're in a bit of a caloric deficit. Now we want to feed your body so that it's primed for performance. We still want you to be able to go into the gym and perform at a high level to gain strength, to gain lean body mass, continue to burn more body fat. Sometimes that means we have to ebb and flow and lose the ability to be in a caloric deficit and go back into maintenance. Sometimes after a couple of weeks of maintenance, we go right back into a deficit and we see how long can you respond well here. But it's down to a science, and you can't do this by yourself. You can't do this alone. All the information that I share with you, you can go find online. You can go ask ChatGPT for any of this stuff. You can go to any website and it's probably free. But the unique thing about what we offer when it's one-to-one coaching and program design, or if it's one-to-one nutrition coaching, or even a part of some of the challenges like Rise 45 that we've had in the past, people see results because of the accountability and because of the relationship. This breeds a certain response from people, and it tends to allow people to level up in all aspects, not just within the fitness and nutrition field, but also life. I mean, we have now, and I've continued to start to develop people who want to coach as a mentor to them, and people who also simply just need guidance and tutelage to have more of a happier mindset to go about the things that they want to pursue as an athlete or as a coach or as just a human here on earth trying to maximize the outcome and everything that they do. But that will bring me to a close today. Thank you for tuning in. If you've listened to this point, I hope that you've appreciated the information that I did get a chance to share. This was very surface level nutrition. You might have felt as though it was a lot of information and I probably talked a bit fast, but it's a solo episode today. This is episode 1 of the True Fitness Podcast. And of course, I am the host, Adrian Conway. So you will hear and see a lot of me. So hopefully that doesn't get too old too fast, but I will be joined by others in episodes to follow. Our goal is to bring you value from both a psychological perspective, but also a physiological perspective, and how we train every day in order to be the best version that we can of whoever we want to be on the other side of this. So have a great day. Please share this podcast. Make sure that you keep your eyes out for the next episode. Subscribe to our channel. And most importantly, keep rising.